You describe yourself as a campaigner, though, but can you summarise, for those of us who are new in the room, does that, what does that mean for you? What are you fighting for? What are you campaigning for?
Well, first, you've just reminded me, I need to welcome everybody.
Oh, yeah.
So happy that you're all here. This is thrilling to have so many people coming together around this the subject that we're going to be talking about today. And we were talking last night, and my brain just jumps to 100 different things I want to say. But ultimately, this is about public shittiness. And I haven't said it that way before, but and how we get, it was you, it's this high academic next to me made me realise it's just about shittiness. In that it's amazing humans are amazingly adaptable and ingenious and responsive, and we can adapt and get used to all sorts of things. We're incredible cockroaches of versatility, and that means we got used to smoke everywhere. We just all thought that was normal. All the slightly older people in this room just thought that was ordinary. And I remember sitting when I was at university, you were in a space the size of this deck bit we were on, with about 17 students and professors, everyone smoking, rolling up, and it just was disgusting. And you reeked, the place reeked, and that seemed just sort of how it is. And pubs, that's how they were. And we didn't think that they could change. But they could change. But no one really sort of properly imagined and said it and kind of came together and enough, I think. So we accepted it for a very long time. And it's similar with food. And we've had it's taken a long time for society much more broadly to talk about ultra-processed food shittiness at low nutritional value, but only when we framed it as health did it properly change, rather than just things we all knew. And it feels like we've had something that is very impactful in our lives, in that kind of most 99% of places new that get built around us are characterless and say nothing to us about our life and are visually unnutritious. And it sort of sounds like, well, does that really matter? Does niceness really matter if we've got a Ukraine war going on and we've got all these weird things happening in the world, and the environment crisis as well? But then once you start seeing things as interlinked systems and start balancing, but the average age of a commercial building is only 40 years before we knock it down again. And so often that's largely because people don't care. And so suddenly care matters, because our dirty secret of our industry is that it's 5 times more greenhouse gases than the aviation industry. So I'm sort of trying to figure out my ways to understand, to talk about public conversation and how do you have impact and how do you make change. And so today, this kind of snowballing of what began as just 40 of us in a room, now there's 140 of us. Now there's the phenomenal Allen Institute looking at science and health, who are partnering with us. There's the University of Glasgow, there's the Humanities and Arts Places program, Rebecca Magin, who's here. So with the academic partners now, because it sort of became clear that the world of buildings had insulated itself really well by saying it's an art. And by saying it was an art, it meant that it's very subjective, and we can't possibly, if you don't like what I do, you're probably a bit stupid. And there was a toxic combination that it's a bit cheaper to make things that are soulless and characterless that no one's going to care about. And so there is a real need, even if you don't give a shit about niceness and don't give a shit about shittiness. Does that work? You probably do all care about your ancestors, your descendants. And so how do we be good ancestors? And so I'm just thrilled that the science dimension, I think, just jumps this to another place. And last time, at the very end, I announced to everybody that we were partnering with you and that you were jumping in. And so it's just thrilling to have the director of the Allen Institute here with us. And as a multidisciplinary person, looking so much more broadly. So.
Absolutely. And the Allen Institute, let's just describe it, and forgive me if I'm wrong, tell me if I'm wrong. You tackle big, massive challenges, don't you? Like in neuroscience and life science, from Alzheimer's and cancer through to addiction, mental health, climate change. You know, there's important work you're doing. I'm interested to know about the connection between the two of you. Rui, why are you interested in supporting a campaign like Humanise? What's the connection there?
Absolutely. So the Allen Institute was founded 20 years ago by Paul Allen, and the objective is to discover big things in life sciences and share it openly with the world. We have multidisciplinary teams, and so, for example, we just finished the mapping of all the cell types in the mammalian brain. 5,300 something, which is an amazing number given our whole body is about 6,800.
They just finished mapping the brain.
Anyway.
Round of applause for finishing mapping the brain. I mean, you heard it here first.
Anyway, there's much more to map because there's as many synapses as stars in our galaxy in each of our brains.
So what brings you to Humanise?
So what took me, so typically people think of the knowledge in brain science as helping us in disease. 3.4 billion of us, 1/3 of us, will suffer from a type of brain disease. And that's one aspect, but I would argue all of us can benefit from the knowledge of how our brain works in our everyday life. And so part of my passion is to bring that knowledge, what we know about the brain, into public service, into education, into how we make decisions, into how we build our cities. And so that's the strength. How can we use knowledge, fundamental knowledge about the brain, to drive a new type of experimentation and research, multidisciplinary, that actually influences our everyday life.
So what do we know about the brain and buildings? What's the connection there? What's the impact of the outsides of buildings on our brains that you know about so far?
So you'll hear from people that actually do some research today. One of the first areas that we mapped was the visual cortex. And one simple thing that happens is if you have more sameness, your visual cortex stops responding. So imagine if you see a stimulus and you keep on seeing the same thing, it actually predicts that you're going to see this. The inhibitory part, your inhibitory neurons go up like a mirror image. It cancels out. You don't even respond.
And the problem with that is
there's no attention, it's sameness, so it's good because you predict, but if everything is predicted, look at our clothes. We all wear different clothes. So when you walk in cities, if there's small details, the brain gets surprised. It grabs the attention, it captures the attention, it provokes physicality of movement, it actually promotes flow of thought.
Keeps you alive.
Yeah, look, our brain is still more or less the same for the last 10,000 years. But we have evolved transgenerational. We'll learn everything from the previous generations into this generation. And a lot of it is built on what we have. That brain likes things in nature, likes mixtures of elements. Even every tree in a forest is slightly different. And we evolved like that. So there's knowledge there, fundamental knowledge about the brain, but we need much more research and experimentation on the details. So yes, curvature, certain colors are appealing, some types of mixtures of elements, but rather than solutioning here, our goal is to appeal for this type of research, applied research of brain knowledge into everyday life.
Thomas, research, there's loads of it out there. Why do you need a partnership with the Allen Institute? What do you hope it will bring for the Humanise campaign?
My hope is that we've had one of the biggest industries ever in history, the construction industry. I think we now have created more physically made matter on the planet than there is natural matter on the planet. The weight of what we have built as humans compared to the weight of nature on our planet is greater. So it's an immense industry, and most industries measure the effectiveness of themselves. And we have not been measuring. So you look at the finance industry, the effectiveness of a dollar, or the oil and gas industry, and our industry of construction has not measured what does it give back to society? And it's got a funny dynamic because it isn't commissioned by society. It's commissioned by very few people. So I only have to convince maybe 5, 10 people, and sometimes hundreds of millions of pounds will get spent on something, and there's no sense of the two clients that you have, and the two clients being the customer who's paying you to do something, and the other customer who's the public, because the public don't have a voice, because they will never come in your building or whatever it is.
They don't consume it in the same way that
But they
a resident
will
or
be
a-
most impacted
Yeah.
and have no, it's imposed on them. So it isn't an art like painting that you can walk out of the gallery, or it isn't an art like music that you can take the headphones off. It's an art that's at everybody.
Can I go back a step? Because why are you so passionate about this? What is it personally that drives you? Because you've run a really successful firm. Why do this?
Yeah, it's slightly suicidal in a
is
sense.
it?
Yes, it
Okay.
is, yeah.
You did run a really successful firm.
I used to, yeah, we're here, it's awake. I think because in looking at the studio's work, I realized how we can try and, in a way, our work has been slightly almost raging against this issue that we hadn't really put our finger on, which is that this rise of characterlessness everywhere, and where every city you'd go to, the new bit was more and more similar to the new bit of the other places. And so we, with our projects, were doing things which were doing everything we possibly could. And I realized how uninfluential projects are and what individual projects and it came about from when I was 13. My dad took me to Milton Keynes, and we went to an exhibition of houses of the future. And in a field, instead of an exhibition of drawings or an exhibition of conceptual theories written down that no one will understand, they built full-size buildings. And I remember there was this pyramid house that harvested the heat of the sun, and they really had made this effort. So we were just there in Wellington boots, like going from house to house. And about 25 years later, our studio was appointed as lead artist for Milton Keynes for a little while. And I suddenly thought, where's that pyramid house? And so we went off to find it, and we were sort of driving around and then found this street of just dead buildings, like really soulless, like machine gunned in, like pyramid house. And you realize that house had no impact whatsoever. And that when people put extra effort, the world makes excuses. It isn't actually that influenced. What it does is it says, well, that was a different time. That was a different planner. That was a different client. They had a different budget.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's not. And so if people make a special opera house, everyone else feels totally entitled to build totally ordinary things around it. Go, look what you can see out the window, this special opera house. And I'm not saying everything should be opera houses. It became clear that the problem is how do you change the conversation across everything? And the reason I'm so passionate is because I love public life. I love being in the street. I'm a partial introvert, but I love going on public transport, just being in streets. There's something
bus, for
amazing.
example.
And I also feel the sense of the honor, the responsibility and privilege. If you are going to build something on the street that's going to be there for decades, hopefully centuries, what a responsibility that is. And the sense that you are in public life. And in our industry, we do not talk about how we are public servants. There's a sense of servant architecture is not there.
It's
and
short-termism.
Hardly anyone. And so that I
I've
feel
done the design, I'm moving on.
I feel
don't need to-
passionate
yeah.
because I feel if there's a way to change that conversation, it actually will be more impactful than our studios projects. So we'll carry on with one or two.
Was one of the things that actually attracted me to this project was that Thomas divided a little bit his work and this campaign as two different things, because you build exceptional buildings. And there's a lot of work in the neuroscience, for example, of looking at art. But there's less work on the neuroscience of looking at everyday things and objects and how we interact. And your passion for changing the public life, the public cities, it's not only that extraordinary building, it should be the housing we need to build for all our folks, our schools, our subways, our public transportation, all the outside. And when we talk about neuroscience having an impact in everyday life, if it's an extraordinary painting or building, I mean, people admire that and people have measured the reactions of the brain, but to your door level in the book, what's the reaction of the brain to a different type of environment you enter?
And
right?
I think we realize that it's actually only science, I think, that will break the situation, because it's cheaper. It's a bit cheaper to build flat, shiny, monotonous, anonymous, repetitive, endless thing. And it's only if society speaks that there will be change. And society feels totally powerless. I think public life is a bit in jeopardy. Streets are dangerous when you don't have lots of people on them. That's where Jane Jacobs, the urbanist, wrote about this, about how, conversely, you're safer the more people are around, because there's a sort of sense of you look after each other. And now that the digital revolution has been so brilliant at making us stay at home, and stay at home because you can work from home, you can study from home, you can get all your food from home. The reasons we saw each other, and civility tends to break out when people are actually with each other, and people are quite toxic with each other online and think that's okay. And so I think there is an imperative, and I think it's only when society speaks, and I think that it's astonishing, our industry hates the idea of being measured. I've had very well-known figures of who are like, how dare you do not measure, because we're the arts. And I think there's this not acknowledging that it's design. And it's a service design serving society. And unless something changes that narrative and we have real data that can prove that certain things, I'm not trying to make a new ism of a new shape language, because I think you can make human buildings that with square lines. I think you can make them with curves. I think you can make them with Tudor. You can make them with cyber. It's not about a style. I think they can be ugly even and still be quite human. So it's not just about beauty, but about engagement.
Can I ask you about the submissions? Put your hand up if you submitted a building that gives you joy to today. Yeah? Have you spotted your photograph of your building on the walls? These are submissions from people who have got, been sparked by joy, to coin another phrase. Do these images give you some hope that it's not all doom and gloom, that people are paying attention to their environment?
Because these amazing group of people in here absolutely. And I think that the things we need to do are out there and are achievable. And I think it's only if society says it that it won't just be the most enlightened property developers who do things, but actually society, because cities have lost their confidence to build. So it is down to enlightened property developers, and we have them here. We've got one of the main directors of Argent and Situ, and these are people who know, because they've got long-term ownership over things, that, it sounds obvious, make a place that people might love, that they'll keep coming back.
So make it an expectation and commonplace rather than the pyramid in the middle of the...
I think it has to become ordinary to be interesting and strange to not be engaging for people. And but I don't think we'll get there unless we have data and about health. I think that's the only way we'll unlock this, because there's too much money that's easy to keep avoiding having to spend. But actually, in the long term, it'll save us money, because buildings won't be knocked down in the same way. We can adapt them and adjust them and repair them instead.
Good, excellent. We've got questions now, I hope. Please put your hand up if you have a question or a comment, reflection on what you've heard so far. You have there, madam, anyone else? I feel like an auction bidder. And you got a couple of questions. 3, brilliant, okay. So we'll start with you first, if you don't mind. If you wouldn't mind waiting for the mic. Okay, yes, this table at the front here with the hand up. Would you say your name and tell us where you're from, what company you're from, anything you want to sort of, position yourself, frame yourself.
Hi, I'm Jo Kroback. I am an architect and interior designer, and I also teach interior designers how to get into the industry. It's a pleasure to be here today, so thank you for organising this. My question is, you said it only costs slightly less to design a building that is, I'm going to use the word boring or like flat.
Shitty.
Yeah.
That's the word you're looking
That is the exact word that I was looking for. Can you just expand on that just a little bit? Because I'm looking, this is the first time I'm announcing this, so I'm looking to go into the development industry. So from design into development. So I'm now going to start investing into bigger developments rather than just designing them. So I want to be influenced because already I'm thinking the other way. And I'm embarrassed to say it because I'm looking at the price.
So your question is about cost and that cost differential between doing something obvious and that everyone else has been doing and doing something different. So tell us about the cost.
Because you've obviously done it.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you're torn both ways. The Victorians built millions of boxes, but they had some humanizing details that they put into those boxes. So they weren't twisted, contorting, crazy shapes. They were boxes, and there was a sort of a language and a family of moves you could make, which now we look at as very extravagant. And when we look at the housing that gets built now, which has kind of got absolutely every single one on the menu of augmentations of the box ripped off it. And so I think we are very easily pleased, actually. You know, when I see housing awards, the ones that win, like major housing awards, you just think, you haven't won because you're wonderful, you just won because you're less bad. I haven't actually seen any real housing projects where I think that's wonderful, and that isn't just copying the past. Our experience in the studio is that that quite small things. There's the one thing we spoke about was there's 3 distances. This sort of city distance of how you experience a building, the street distance, which is sort of when buildings are on the other side of the street, maybe 50 meters away, but door distance. And door distance is the one where you really feel, is there any love here? And it's the cheapest distance. And so I don't think we're proposing that the world shouldn't be made from boxes, but we are all walking around, cycling around, driving around at street level. And it's not something celebrated enough that that's the place where you can get the greatest value. And I think urbanists like Jan Gehl and speak about how our heads move much more easily this way than up and down. We've just worked on a massive project in Japan where there's the tallest tower in the whole of Japan in the middle of our project. And we did everything else, including housing, a school for 1,000 children, rebuilding a new temple, shopping spaces, gallery spaces, park spaces. And you don't notice the tower. It's slightly reflective, And so in the industry, you spend so much time looking at like helicopter shots and marveling, but the real experienced world for buildings isn't looking down at them, it's on the ground. And you think about the lockdown walks sometimes people did, you know, when you're allowed to go for a walk, the joy someone would get just from looking at the foot scrapers on buildings, or that someone put a foot scraper in the side of a building. It costs so little to put foot scrapers, not that we need foot scrapers anymore, but what are those little things? We've found in our own projects, lift buttons. Even if you don't have much money for anything else, like a lift button, you can make an extraordinary, like special, distinctive thing. And so I wish the outcome of this campaign would also be that we have an incredible amount of very, very creative people who spend a lot of their time making things for auction houses and rich people's homes and galleries. And you just think, if just 5% of all of you lot were interested in, you can have your work seen by 1,000 people, but you could have your work seen by 10 million people. Which would you rather? And I think we've got this, buildings used to be made by a kind of orchestra of people. There was a whole collection of people rather than the sense of one author. So I think we could have many more collaborations, and the first floor is like door distance, inexpensive. You can have another floor. You should say to the planning, let me have another floor to pay for it. But it's cheap.
And I push Thomas. I know you want a narrative that's slightly more expensive. I think it could be same price with new materials, new ways. Look at our clothes. I cannot predict how much you paid for your clothes here today. Everyone dressed differently. And even normal clothing became a little bit, people want to be special and move different things. So if you understand, like, for example, this idea that we move more like this, you may not spend so much money on other things. And there's a perverse thing I wanted to say using the example of the food. Industrialized food started by being cheaper. But now it's the same price of a packed loaf of bread or a fresh bread. The industry then adapts and pay. And today, I was telling Thomas, it's not that a cheaper building is cheaper for the consumer. You build a nice building or in the part of town, the difference, it will be mostly the location, right? And that dictates the square footage. So it's actually a false dichotomy. You pay the same today for a packaged, multi-processed bread as a sourdough loaf. It didn't start that way, but the industry then adapts, and that becomes the standard.
Okay, let's take 2 more questions before we wrap up. So we had a question, if you can take the roving mic to the back. If you want to put your hand up, thank you very much. And when you get the mic, say your name, where'd you come from? Hello.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, incredibly enlightening and inspiring. My name is Hardeep. I'm from Zettler. We're a PR and comms agency focused on social good, working with artists, designers, and architects. Coming off the last point, actually, Thomas, that you mentioned, there are people doing incredible work, but for finite clients with big budgets. There's also been a movement for decades of individuals doing this exact sort of work, so rehumanizing our conversations, our buildings, but they haven't had the funding, right? There's a constant battle of story around cheapness, around expediency. But these people have built practices and studios, and still to this day, they must find grants and benefactors. So I wondered, if we don't have the same reach as a big brand behind us, how can one inspire, yes, but actually provide money and commissions into the hands of these people who are doing the work, who've done the research, and they have some proof of concept, some proof of projects?
Just briefly then.
Thank you.
My sense, it's about the public conversation. Property developers and, cities and development companies used to build even sewage works, were proud to make a sewage works, proud to make the public toilets. And, so society expected there to be a sort of a level of effort. And I think that was normal. And I think if we can change the public conversation, so we know that you're building somewhere shitty and it's not acceptable. And that isn't happening at the moment. We haven't looked at each other in the eyes and said, this isn't acceptable. And the industry, the construction industry, to my amazement, hasn't said, we've screwed up in the last 80 years. Like, what have we been doing? So until we all look at each other and accept there is a problem and there's been a bit of a disaster, then things will change. And I think then there will be a buoyancy, because as soon as you accept there's a problem, then there are people who are ready to come and fill it. But I think we have to change public conversation, and that's why the book was done.
It's actually one step further, because we knew tobacco, I mean, using our example from yesterday, we knew tobacco was bad, but to change behavior is much harder. So there's a lot of awareness now about what we're talking about, but to change people's behavior is another step. You know, we all know some things are good or bad for us. To use that knowledge, so that's why a campaign is to raise awareness, but change behavior based on knowledge.
Okay.
That's tough.
Okay, final question was down here as well, wasn't it, rather handily? Put your hand up. Yes, hello. Say your name, where are you from?
Hi, I'm Thorold Barker. I just had to follow up to your point about seeing these experimental houses or houses of the future in Milton Keynes. Obviously, a lot of adults in this room who've got used to the way things are during their lifetimes. How are you thinking about giving the next generation coming through, the younger folks in education and beyond, these experiences that you've had that help to change their expectations and their mindsets as they grow up in this world, rather than trying to change the embedded mindsets of people who've got used to this over many decades?
Great question, Thomas.
Well, this public thing. I hoped somebody else would do it. And then the people who I admired are not around anymore. And sort of the people who were my heroes, who I'd look up to. And so you then realize, well, if we don't use the platform of our studio, me and my partners here, to try and use that, we have had a sort of spotlight on our work. So that led to the radio series that we did, and we're going to do another radio series as well. And even people who disagreed with us were saying, so happy that people are talking about buildings on the radio. And so I'm the general director of this Seoul Architecture Biennale. So I've been let into the chicken coop. And there's the team of us, and Matt is really working very closely on this from the Humanise team. And so we are, normally architecture biennales are for architects. And I think that's the problem, is this closed loops. And so I agreed to do it on the condition that it would be citywide, and that we wouldn't be speaking to the industry who already knows everything or thinks it does, but it would involve everyone in Seoul. And so they've given us the go-ahead. It starts in September, and one of the things we're doing, because it's very hard to show buildings that aren't built, so big things become drawings and conceptual explanations. So we're making it about the walls of public life. And so we're going to be getting different designers, and actually fashion designers as well, designing full-size pieces of outsides of buildings, and we're building them. So we're planning to build 30 or 40 two-story high fragments. So they're fragments of the building. So hopefully you'll be like, show me the rest of your building. But it's getting engineers, neuroscientists, traditional makers. We're also going to have some pieces of boring buildings as well in the mix, with no judgment, other than what I've said to you, but just to let people just feel, what is your emotion when if buildings were like this, or this, or this. And it's not about crazy shapes of buildings, it's accepting boxes, but saying, how could you affect how you feel?
And has anyone got any young people in their lives? Or maybe you are a young person. Great.
I used to be one.
conversations.
I used to
Yeah.
be one, yes.
Driving around, pointing things out, walking around. Look at that. What do you think? What do you feel? How do you react? And sparking those conversations.
That's the
that
reason. It's
awareness.
hoping that a little 12-year-old girl could come along and doesn't have to read a billion bits of explanation, but can feel this is trying to make it engaging and something that society can talk about together and have opinions on. And what's between my legs is Ruth gave this to me, Ruth Dalton, who's the architect and educator and really interested in the neuroscience. And what's exciting for me is she's been working with her students to get them thinking about their emotions and buildings. And it's worth looking at what they've been doing here. It's really, really incredible looking at their responses.
Excellent. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both so much. Please, a round of applause for Rui Costa and Thomas Heatherwick.